I do defensive rankings in fantasy football every single week of the new week of fantasy football. Usually I do it on Thursday, but I got a request to do it on Tuesday before waivers process on Wednesday, and I'm a man of the people. So we're doing our top 12 fantasy football defense rankings for week 8 fantasy football before waivers process on Wednesday. And I am one of the only fantasy football YouTubers who covers defense on a weekly basis and gets top 12 defenses out to you guys on a weekly basis. So please go down there, drop a like on this video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support, and also to get a chance to win one of these FFN hats right here. Let's go ahead and just get right into these rankings this week. So, number 1, coming off the bye week, with a great opponent on tap, I've got the New York Jets defense taking on the New York Giants in New York. I mean, basically, it's home field advantage for them too. They share a field, so it's not like the Giants have some sort of home field advantage here. And obviously, the Giants are coming off one of their only wins this season against the Washington Commanders. Yeah, that's going to change this week, because not only is Washington's defense not nearly as good as the Jets, but also the Giants are taking on an offense that's better. And it's weird to say, but the Jets are a better offense than Washington. The Jets offense, they've got playmakers. They've got Breece Hall playing really well right now. Zach Wilson's playing some of his best football ever in the NFL with Garrett Wilson. Why does it matter for the Jets defense? Well, because I think the Jets defense is going to be playing from ahead. They're not going to have to worry about stopping Daniel Jones or Tyrod Taylor, whoever they have at quarterback this week, in a negative game script. The Jets are going to be on top early, I think, in this game. And as you can see on the screen, they're dominant. Almost 10 fantasy points per game, averaging just over 2 sacks a game, but they're causing turnovers. They're wreaking havoc in backfields. They're getting aggressive turnovers on the defensive backfield side. The Jets defense, to me, is locked and loaded, ready to go, coming off a bye week, with a high morality in that locker room right now with the potential return of Aaron Rodgers. I think the Jets defense is going to be all over the Giants this week. Number 2, Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Denver Broncos. A couple weeks ago, they played the Denver Broncos and they were fantastic on Thursday Night Football. Their defense had about 16 fantasy points. And they have played serious opponents this year. That's how you know the Chiefs are a really good team. The Chiefs have played the Detroit Lions. They've just beat the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chiefs have played good offenses, and they've done well against all of them. They're averaging under 9 fantasy points per game, getting after your quarterback for 3 sacks a game, and they're getting turnovers as well. The Chiefs defense, to me, it's one of the, I've said this all year, it's the best defense that Patrick Mahomes has ever played with, dating back to Texas Tech. The Chiefs defense is real, and their opponent is not good. Everything lines up here. I don't care if it's in Denver. I don't care if it's in Kansas City. It's in Denver, by the way. It doesn't matter. Kansas City Chiefs defense is easy top 2. Number 3, the Baltimore Ravens this week taking on the Arizona Cardinals. And honestly, guys, it doesn't matter where this one is either. Number 1, because Baltimore's defense is elite. They're playing elite level football right now. Basically 10 fantasy points per game, 4 sacks a game, and they're getting turnovers, almost a pick a game. They've been excellent, all over you. Physical, fast, athletic, dynamic, you name it, Baltimore Ravens have been that on defense. And number 2 reason is because Arizona Cardinals, they're starting to falter. They scored 10 points last week. They were not competitive in week 6. They weren't competitive in week 5. The Arizona Cardinals are falling apart. And it's to be expected. They don't have as much talent on the roster. Even if Kyler Murray comes back in the off chance he plays this week, it's not going to make a difference to me. Baltimore's defense is just too elite right now. They're on fire right now. I think Baltimore's defense rolls over the Arizona Cardinals this week. Number 4, the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys coming off the bye this week, taking on the Los Angeles Rams. This is a team that it was interesting because before the season started, I had the Rams pegged as one of the worst teams in the NFL. Obviously, they've done much better than I expected, but they're actually starting to lose a step. And the real problem is that it's not a lack of weapons. They've got Cooper Kupp back. They've got Puka Nacua absolutely just turning it on the Jets. They lost Kyron Williams, but Matt Stafford could still sling it. The main problem that the Rams have is their offensive line is tragically bad. The Steelers last week were getting all over Matt Stafford. And they force him to throw interceptions because Matt Stafford has always been prone to turnovers. If you think the Dallas Cowboys defense is going to be any easier on the Pittsburgh Steelers, you're sorely mistaken. The Dallas Cowboys defense is an easy selection here at number 4. Fantasy points per game through the freaking roof because they're so aggressive and they're so great at causing turnovers. Number 5, the Houston Texans this week taking on the Carolina Panthers. It's simple because not only are the Houston Texans improving week by week, they're coming off a bye week as well. They're well rested. They're ready to go. And you can see, like, nothing is super impressive about their numbers on the screen, but they're getting better week to week. You remember the first 2 weeks, they looked like the old Houston Texans. Ever since that week, they've been getting better and better and better. The Houston Texans are turning into a legit team this year. And they're obviously playing a team that hasn't won a game yet. Now, Carolina's coming off a bye week too, so you can make the argument that they'll be well rested as well. But I'll take the team that looks way better this season, has a way better coach, aggressive head coach with DeMeco Ryans, former stud player, was an absolute, incredible defensive coordinator. He's turning this defense around. Houston Texans, easy selection, number 5. Number 6, the Buffalo Bills this week. And the only reason they're here is because they're taking on an injured Tampa Bay Buccaneers team on Thursday night. So I've got a lot of issues with the Buffalo Bills right now. The Buffalo Bills do not look like themselves. In fact, they looked like, the past 2 weeks, they've looked like what they did against the Jets in week 1. And I thought they had figured it out. They're starting to fall back again. The Bills defensively, they were such a disappointment last week against the New England Patriots, no less. Now, to be fair to the Bills defense, division games are always different. They're always a mixed bag because of the familiarity of the coaching staff, the players, the personnel. So anything can happen in a divisional game. I understand that. The problem that I have with the Bills is that not only are they not exactly always healthy, but they had a week like last week where they weren't really putting much pressure on Mac Jones. They weren't forcing turnovers like they should have been. So when they're taking on Tampa Bay offense that is injured, Baker Mayfield coming into this week injured, Chris Godwin coming into the week injured, there's an advantage here, I think, for Buffalo because Buffalo's the better team. I think they're the more talented team between them and Tampa, and I think that they'll be able to get Tampa Bay into a hole where Tampa Bay's going to have to climb out of it, and it's not going to go super well. So Thursday night game, the matchup advantage with all the injuries, that's the reason they're here at number 6. But make no mistake, the Buffalo Bills are they have me a little nervous defensively right now. Number 7, the Jacksonville Jaguars taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers here. Jacksonville's defense has been way better in fantasy football than I expected them to be. They've been a very good defensive team this year. They're not averaging a ton of sacks per game. They're not generating super amounts of pressure. Josh Allen has been a good player this year, and Trayvon Walker has been okay, but they're not forcing 4 sacks a game, as you can see on the screen. What they are doing is they're still aggressive and forcing turnovers. They're averaging 2 turnovers per game by picks and by forced fumbles recovered. So the Jacksonville defense against a Pittsburgh Steelers offense that is just simply Mickey Mouse level. I've said this for weeks now, and I don't care that they just put up 24 points on the Rams. They're still not a good offense. And Jacksonville's defense is way better than the Rams. So I like their matchup here. But I've got the Pittsburgh Steelers taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars in the same matchup here. And let me be clear, Jacksonville's offense is finding their groove. They're looking better. Even with Trevor Lawrence not at full health right now, he looks fantastic on Thursday night against a stout New Orleans Saints defense. Trevor Lawrence, Jacksonville Jaguars, they've got playmakers. Travis Etienne having a stellar season. As I predicted, that's aside the point. Travis Etienne's been great. Christian Kirk and him, great chemistry. Calvin Ridley occasionally big plays, but their offense, it really is just coming together. The only reason the Pittsburgh Steelers are on here week to week is because of turnover capability. And they have done well holding their opponents to very few points over the past several weeks. So Pittsburgh, to me, they came off the bye. They were really impressive against the Rams, and they're just so physical up front, averaging over 3 sacks per game, averaging 2 turnovers per game. They're such a physical team that is so capable of making you force into complete errors on offense. That's the reason they're here week to week. Number 9, the Philadelphia Eagles this week, taking on the Washington Commanders this week in Washington. Listen, a couple weeks ago, Philadelphia played Washington, And I had their defense ranked, I think, as a top 4 or 5 defense, and they were a massive disappointment. They let Washington's offense put 30 points on them, and they almost lost the game. So I'm not saying that Philadelphia's defense is perfect. They're still very good, though. You can see the numbers on the screen. They're physical up front. Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Fletcher Cox, Nakobe Dean, they're just so stacked up front. And that's why they're averaging almost 3.5 sacks per game. And they're also just aggressive and fast. They're forcing turnovers. So I think Washington was on that day against the Philadelphia Eagles. And again, divisional matchup is always unpredictable. But the way Washington's offense is playing right now, I just can't see Philadelphia not being inside the top 10 defenses in fantasy football this week. Number 10, New Orleans Saints this week, taking on the Indianapolis Colts. Listen, I think that Indianapolis, they're going to be a tough out for a lot of teams this year, especially against the New Orleans Saints, who don't have a good offense at all. So Indianapolis is really a good offense led by a good coach. But the simple reality is that regardless of who New Orleans takes on, they're always a decent defensive option. They're averaging 9 fantasy points per game. Why? Because they're forcing turnovers and they're not letting teams get that many yards on them. They obviously had a down game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Well, that's one of the best offenses they've played all year. Gardner Minshew, week to week, you don't know what you're going to get here. But New Orleans defense, you do know what you're going to get. New Orleans defense this week taking on the Indianapolis Colts in Indy. I think that they're a solid defensive play. I just wouldn't go out of my way to play them over a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers or the Jacksonville Jaguars. Number 11, the Cleveland Browns defense, man. Coming off an absolutely resounding victory against the Indianapolis Colts. They're taking on the Seattle Seahawks in Seattle. Listen, I don't love this matchup particularly. Seattle's got playmakers all over that offense. But did you watch Cleveland's defense in week 7? They were unreal. Myles Garrett is a one-man wrecking crew. Denzel Ward in the secondary. They've got playmakers at every level of this defense, and they've been tremendous. They had their best fantasy football week as far as defense goes in week 7. 9 points per game, 3 sacks per game. They're still not forcing a ton of turnovers, which is the main problem here and why I can't rank them higher than this. And especially against the Seattle Seahawks offense that has largely been not super prone to turnovers this year. But Geno Smith is still not a great quarterback. They may be down DK Metcalf again. Their offense is not 100%, and even when they are 100%, it's still not fantastic. And that's why Cleveland's here. The opportunistic defense that they have, I love the idea of having Cleveland defense as my fantasy defense in week 8. Number 12, rounding it out, the Minnesota Vikings taking on the Green Bay Packers. Listen, I had this list slotted before the Monday night game, and honestly, I was so impressed with Minnesota's defense against the San Francisco 49ers. I feel more confident than I did before the game started. Minnesota's defense actually looked really good. And listen, the fact is that Brian Flores is a very good defensive coordinator, and Danielle Hunter's playing out of his mind right now. So they've got playmakers on that defense. They're starting to look like they might find a groove. 8.2 fantasy points per game, 3 sacks per game, over a forced fumble per game. Like, they're physical, they're well coached, and they're taking on a Green Bay offense that looks absolutely awful. They had over a week to prepare for the Denver Broncos, and the best they could do was 17 points. Awful. Just absolutely terrible. Jordan Love is not a good quarterback. And they're actually going to be without a lot of weapons this weekend. They're going to be without Jayden Reed, possibly. They might be without Christian Watson again. Aaron Jones, not 100%, even if he does play. Green Bay's offense is one to take advantage of, and based on Minnesota's performance against the 49ers, I feel really confident having them inside my top 12 this week. And as we do at the end of every single defense ranking video every single week, I give you my bonus defense pickup for the next week in fantasy football if you have the roster space and if you can afford to put them on your bench. This week's for week 9 is going to be the Indianapolis Colts taking on the Carolina Panthers. Honestly, it's pretty easy to kind of go and select a team that's playing the Panthers. And the Colts, I've been really hot and cold on this season as far as their defense goes. There's weeks where they look really good, and then there's weeks last week against the Cleveland Browns where they don't look very good. I'll take their defense this week in week 9 against the Carolina Panthers because I know that the Colts are capable of making turnovers. They still have physical bodies up front. They're still aggressive to the point of attack. Carolina Panthers have struggled so much this year offensively. It's hard not to pick a defense that is very much unrostered at this point in fantasy football in this type of matchup. So let me know what you think of the defensive rankings in the comments below and what questions you need answered before week 8 fantasy football. And if you want to see the top 30 wide receiver rankings for week 8 fantasy football, click on this video right here.